From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today I'll be reviewing the movie A View to a Kill, released in 1985. Starring Roger Moore, Christopher Walken, and Tanya Roberts. Directed by John Glenn. The synopsis is: James Bond is back for another installment, going after a mysterious microchip maker, Max Zorin of Zorin Industries, and helped along by a geologist, Stacy Sutton. The story. This was the 14th James Bond movie and the 7th and final James Bond role for Roger Moore. The screenplay was written by Richard Maibaum and Michael G. Wilson. The title comes from the 1959 publishing of an Ian Fleming short story, From a View to a Kill, when it was included in For Your Eyes Only. The word "from" was dropped before the filming began in 1984. This film has no real relation to the original story, but it borrows some ideas from the 1981 novel Licensed Renewed, written by John Gardner. The book features Ascot horse racing similar to that seen in this film. The film also borrows some themes from Goldfinger, released in 1964, regarding a plan to commit mass murder for financial gain. When it comes to Bond flicks, you get the same story formula that has worked since the 1960s that never fails to entertain. We have the opening action scene, followed by the opening title sequence featuring a new impressive title song and gorgeous girls dancing in an artistic montage. The classic soundtrack melody, Damsel in Distress or Female Counterpart, Bond infiltrates the bad guy's organization, Bond gets caught and escapes, a big showdown at the end, and Bond saves the day and wins the girl. Now, the one thing that was missing from the Bond movie formula was the memorable tech gadget scene, where Q shows James Bond all of the gadgets that he'll be using on his mission. If it happened, I completely missed it, but I've watched this film so many times and I just can't find it. The story begins with a big, over-the-top snow chase scene, and it's pretty amazing. Somehow, I've never watched a snow chase scene that I didn't like in my whole life, as of yet, and it's a weird thing, but it always seems to get me pumped up. All of this action is about a microchip that Bond swipes from Russia. It turns out that this chip is nearly indestructible and is made by Zorin Industries. In the wrong hands, it could be dangerous in weaponized technology. It seems very weird to connect these two things, but a thoroughbred horse racing scheme leads Bond to a fault line mining tunnel, in which he has to save Silicon Valley. It's pretty far-fetched. The fishing line, a butterfly weapon that was used in the Eiffel Tower restaurant scene to kill Bond's French liaison, and a ditched idea from another one of my favorite James Bond films, Moonraker, released in 1979. Bond unexpectedly makes quiche at Stacy's home as a reference to a popular book at the time called Real Men Don't Eat Quiche, released in 1980, written by Bruce Firestein, who later went on to write the screenplay for GoldenEye, released in 1995. The pacing. The pacing at 2 hours and 11 minutes is absolutely too long. And it really feels as if there are two movies in one. We have a racehorse sleuth section that is probably the most boring to get through, and then we have a major disaster to foil, which brings back the excitement into the film. The challenge. The challenge in this film is Max Zorin. Max is actually a creation of Dr. Carl Mortner, whose real name is Hans Glob. Mortner experimented on pregnant women in concentration camps during World War II in an attempt to enhance intelligence by using steroids. Max was the result of Glob's experiments, and ever since he and Mortner have this odd father and son relationship. To be honest, Max seems suspicious to us in the beginning, but he's not really doing anything too sinister, besides cheating on the racehorse industry. We never suspect him of much more than that, but he just keeps on trying to kill Bond and his contacts, so something's gotta be up. That was one specific thing I liked about the villain here. He's always one step ahead of Bond, and actually a real challenge, before he even knows that Bond is MI6. It's only through some slow-moving sleuthing that we discover that about an hour and a half into the film that Max plans to destroy Silicon Valley so he can have a monopoly on microchips in the world. This is slightly nonsense since the microchip's capabilities to withstand potential damage alone would make it one of the most desirable in the market. And so that doesn't make him the smartest villain, but still an interesting one. Max's henchman is actually a henchwoman, the ridiculously strong and impressive Mayday. At some point you get the feeling that Mayday could be the only person that Max could actually love. They certainly do make a cruel pair, as the two of them say the title quote, "What's a view to a kill." They are just deliciously on the same level in every scene they are in together. However, it turns out that Max is not too attached, as chance would have it that he makes the decision to leave Mayday and his men to die in the tunnels underneath San Francisco at the very end of the film. This proves that Max Zorin is one of the vilest of the vile, and he guns down his own men with glee. Not only does he do it for the practical reason of not wanting any witnesses to connect him to this quote-unquote natural disaster, he is actually a new age of villainy, as he really enjoys being cruel and unjust. All of his actions, even his micro expressions, really gives you a better sense of his warped little mind, and I really enjoyed that. Empathy. Well, Bond gets a lot of empathy right off the bat for being who he is, and that's fine. But you never feel as if he's in any danger. He's just gonna find a way to escape or succeed. But you do find yourself worried about the people he's with. Sir Godfrey Tibbets was Bond's compadre during his stakeout at Zorin's mansion. He and Bond have a great chemistry together, and it's really sad to see what happens to him because he seems like a really nice and sweet older guy that just wants to help out the best he can. Bond got involved with Stacey Hutton, who has been getting harassed by Zorin to sell her property. And I'm not quite sure why, because he actually didn't need it in the end. But what the story did need was Stacey's super geological skills to tell us exactly what Zorin was up to and what his plans are. The technical aspects. The biggest issues that have been universally pointed out are many of the stunts that are really great, but they're clearly done by stunt actors. So it kind of ruins the illusion and takes you out of the story for a bit. But no doubt the stunts were pretty impressive and quite memorable. Dianne Feinstein was mayor of San Francisco during the filming, and because of her love of James Bond and specifically Roger Moore, she granted all the necessary permits to film in the city. And the film really captures the beauty of San Francisco wonderfully. It's always nice seeing Bond films in American locations because they always seem to lead to a bump in tourism, and that even though this is a UK franchise, it brings it to American fans who love the franchise. Now, John Barry wrote the theme song, Dance into the Fire, along with Duran Duran, and the lovely melody was wonderfully cycled into the score. In particular, Dance Into the Fire was the only James Bond song to reach #1 in the USA, which achieved a goal of reaching the very young and impressionable MTV generation at the time. For me, it was a great iconic Bond song with an energetic tune. It also has some of the weirdest lyrics sung by the sultry twang of the lead singer Simon Le Bon. And it sounds like the ramblings of an intoxicated lunatic. I absolutely love it. The performances were pretty awesome in my opinion. I really love Roger Moore as James Bond. He's just, I guess he's the James Bond I always think of because he's the one that was around when I was a kid. And this was his last role as the character, so there's a bit of sentiments just watching the film and knowing it's his last one. And one big comment I hear a lot is that he was too old for the role at 57, and I highly disagree. To me, it was no different than seeing Sean Connery at the end of his career at Bond, and I think he looked a lot like he did in the previous Bond movie. So Christopher Walken was, in particular, very amazing to me as Max Zorin. His performance in that is like pretty much indicative of many of the other performances that we know of him now. And at the time, he was known as a nice guy, and everyone was pretty much shocked to see him in a role like this. And, I just thought his performance was brilliant, illustrating the character's diabolical and psychological sense of play with his eyes and his body language, and as I mentioned before, those micro expressions. I just loved every minute of him on screen. It was just great. And on Grace Jones, I was so excited to see that she was going to be in this film way back in 1985, and I feel like she nailed the character of the henchwoman Mayday, and she just blew me away with her. Like, she's a strong woman, she is very feisty, very strange and unusual, and I really like the playful screen chemistry that she had between Christopher Walken. It was great. I love seeing those two together. I really enjoyed Patrick Macnee in this, playing Sir Godfrey Tibbets. For me, it's mostly because I'm familiar with him being the opening credit announcer for Battlestar Galactica series in the TV series from 1978 to 1979, and his voice is so iconic. What a beautiful baritone voice. And then I also know him as one of the secret agents in the Avengers UK TV series that ran from 1961 to 1969. This movie was the first acting debut for Dolph Lundgren, one of my favorite actors. And at the time, he was actually Grace Jones's boyfriend. And as a special note, this was Lois Maxwell's last time playing the role of Miss Moneypenny, which she reprised 14 times since Dr. No in 1962. She was also a very close friend of Roger Moore's, as they were in the same dramatic class together at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. The best part of the film. There are so many memorable moments that I really loved. I enjoyed the scene when Bond is trapped underwater and then he breathes the air from the tire. I thought that was cool, and the imagery of Mayday and Max above water was such an excellent touch. I also enjoyed seeing Mayday and Bond work together at the end. In that whole scene, she's totally on board because she has nothing to live for, seeing her friends dead and realizing Zorin left her to die. I like the way that Mayday dies in the film, becoming the ultimate hero here. She saves Silicon Valley, and I love the way she tells Bond, "Get Zorin for me!" It just gives me chills every time I see that particular scene. what an amazing character. When Max sees Mayday come out of the tunnel, he's actually kind of surprised and happy to see her just for a few moments. And his anguish is shown sort of as a bit of a disappointment that his plans are foiled, and the fact that she's like killed right in front of him and she betrayed him all at once. An amazing moment in the film. Another thing that I love about this film, so many things. I just love the way it's like super 80s. The computer technology and the gadgets were all cool, and the fashions and the it's just quite the time capsule, and I just love it. The ending. The ending is a part of the James Bond formula, and that's fine. But when we get that title soundtrack from Duran Duran along with the beautiful views of San Francisco, it's just completely breathtaking. My wish list. I wish that the film had better pacing through the entire film. The first half could have used a little stronger editing to create more energy in some of the scenes and just like make it a little bit snippier and snappier and a little bit more fun. I also wish that the filmmakers appropriately aged Bond's love interest to match Roger Moore, or maybe not even had a love interest for the first time in a film, you know? They could have just added the fact that he was aging right into the film. And I think they're doing that a lot more with the recent Bond movies. I think that the character of James Bond doesn't have to always be a young man, but just a professional spy, and to be honest, the script should have reflected his abilities or disabilities more. He could still foil the bad guy. He's got years and years of experience. My enjoyment. Initially when the film was released, it looked like the battle between the old and the new. The younger freak show villains versus the old MI6. And of course, older audiences didn't like the film very much, but younger audiences enjoyed it. It was a film made for the MTV generation, and they are the ones who really have kept the flame burning for this film for decades. And I'm actually a very big James Bond fan, and this is one of my favorites. I'm not a James Bond snob. Whether it's a dark and a serious movie or a campy and fun one, I pretty much like them all. I have my favorites and I have my least favorites, but I pretty much do enjoy James Bond quite a bit. This is not the best quality of Bond movies, so why is it one of my favorites? I saw this film when it came out, and it had everything that I wanted. It had James Bond. It had two incredibly flamboyant 80s villains. Good action, great music, great cheesy fun. And I think it delivered. It has a lot of flaws, but that's why this is a delicious guilty pleasure of mine. My rating is an 8.2. So that sums up my review. I hope you liked it. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.